The summer heat beat down mercilessly on the empty highway as Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead. She had been walking for over an hour since her old pickup truck finally gave up and died on the side of the road. The mechanic's uniform she wore was already soaked through, and her toolbox felt heavier with each step. She was supposed to be at work 20 minutes ago, but sometimes life had other plans. That's when she heard it. The distinctive rumble of a classic car engine sputtering and coughing. Sarah looked up to see a beautiful 1967 Ford Mustang fastback, pulled over about a quarter-mile ahead. Even from a distance, she could tell it was a genuine classic, probably worth more than she made in 3 years. The car's candy apple red paint gleamed in the sunlight, but something was clearly wrong. White smoke was billowing from under the hood. As she got closer, Sarah could see a man in an expensive-looking suit standing next to the car. He was talking rapidly on his phone, clearly frustrated. His silver hair was perfectly styled and his watch caught the sunlight. Definitely not the kind of person you'd expect to see broken down on this stretch of rural highway. "No, I can't be late for this meeting," the man was saying into his phone. "It's the biggest deal of my career. Find me another car, a helicopter, anything." He noticed Sarah approaching and quickly ended the call. "Excuse me," Sarah called out as she walked up. "I couldn't help but notice you're having some trouble. I'm a mechanic, maybe I can take a look?" The man looked her up and down skeptically. Sarah was used to this reaction. Being a 24-year-old woman in a male-dominated field meant constantly proving herself. Her small frame and youthful face didn't help matters, but her hands were calloused from years of hard work, and her eyes held the confidence of someone who knew their craft. "I appreciate the offer, but I've already called for a tow truck," the man said politely but dismissively. "This car is worth more than most people's houses. I can't risk having someone inexperienced work on it." Sarah nodded understandingly. "I get it. But the nearest tow truck is probably an hour away, and from the sound your engine was making, you might have something simple that could be fixed right here. What do you have to lose by letting me take a quick look under the hood?" The man checked his expensive watch again and sighed. "I'm supposed to be in the city for a meeting in 2 hours. This deal could change everything for my company." He looked at Sarah again, this time really seeing her. Despite her young age, there was something steady and trustworthy about her demeanor. "You really think you might be able to help?" "Won't know until I look," Sarah said with a gentle smile. "But I've been working on cars since I was 12. My dad owned a garage before he passed away, and I've been keeping his legacy alive ever since." The man hesitated for another moment, then nodded. "All right, but please be careful. This car belonged to my father. It's one of the few things I have left of him." Sarah's expression softened. "I understand completely. I'll treat it like it was my own father's car." She set down her toolbox and carefully lifted the hood. The engine bay was immaculate. Someone had put a lot of love and money into maintaining this vehicle. But as she examined the various components, she quickly identified the problem. A radiator hose had split, causing the overheating. It was actually a relatively simple fix, but potentially catastrophic if ignored. "Good news," she said, turning to the man. "It's just a split radiator hose. I carry spares in my kit for emergencies like this. I can have you back on the road in about 20 minutes. The man's face lit up with relief. "Really? You can fix it?" "Absolutely. Though I should warn you, this is just a temporary fix. You'll want to take it to a proper shop and have them replace the entire hose assembly. This will get you to your meeting, but don't push it too hard." As Sarah worked, the man watched in amazement. Her movements were precise and confident, and she handled his precious Mustang with the care of a surgeon. She worked quickly but never rushed, double-checking each connection and making sure everything was properly secured. "I have to admit, I'm impressed," the man said. "Where did you learn to work on classic cars like this?" Sarah smiled as she tightened the last clamp. "My dad specialized in muscle cars from the 60s and 70s. He always said that cars from this era had personality. They weren't just transportation. They were works of art. He taught me that if you listen carefully, a car will tell you exactly what's wrong. Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Sarah said quietly. "He always told me that it doesn't matter if someone drives a rusty old pickup truck or a $1 million classic. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. A person's worth isn't measured by what they drive or how much money they have." The man watched as Sarah cleaned up her tools and carefully checked the engine one more time. There was something different about this young woman. In his world of corporate boardrooms and business deals, People usually wanted something from him. But Sarah seemed genuinely happy to help, expecting nothing in return. "How much do I owe you?" the man asked, reaching for his wallet. Sarah waved him off. "Don't worry about it. I'm just glad I could help you make your meeting." "No, please, I insist. You've saved me potentially millions of dollars. This meeting is that important." Sarah considered this, then smiled. "Tell you what, if the deal goes well, maybe you could put in a good word for Thompson's garage in town. We could use the business." The man extended his hand. "Deal. I'm Robert Chen, by the way." "Sarah Thompson," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. As Robert climbed back into his Mustang, the engine purring smoothly once again, he couldn't help but smile. In all his years of business, he had rarely encountered such genuine kindness. As he drove away, he found himself thinking not about the important meeting ahead, but about the remarkable young woman who had appeared like an angel when he needed help most. Little did he know that their chance encounter was about to change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. Robert Chen arrived at his meeting with 15 minutes to spare, his mind still replaying the encounter with the young mechanic. The conference room on the 40th floor of the downtown skyscraper was filled with his company's board members and representatives from Yamamoto Industries, one of Japan's largest automotive manufacturers. This deal would make Chen Industries a major player in the electric vehicle market. "Gentlemen, ladies," Robert began as he took his seat at the head of the polished conference table.
Thank you all for being here today.
"I know this partnership with Yamamoto Industries represents a significant investment for all parties involved." Mr. Yamamoto, a distinguished man in his 60s, nodded respectfully. "Mr. Chen, we have been following your company's innovations in battery technology with great interest. However, we must discuss our concerns about your manufacturing capabilities." For the next 3 hours, they negotiated terms, discussed production timelines, and analyzed market projections. The deal was worth $200 million, but Robert found his thoughts drifting back to Sarah Thompson. Her simple act of kindness had made this meeting possible, and yet she had refused payment and only asked that he recommend her family's garage. When the meeting concluded successfully, with contracts signed and hands shaken, Robert felt a profound sense of gratitude. As the room emptied, he pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Jennifer, I need you to do some research for me. Find everything you can about Thompson's garage in the rural area about 60 miles north of the city. I want to know about their business, their reputation, and their current situation." 3 days later, Jennifer presented him with a comprehensive report. Thompson's garage had been a fixture in the small town of Millfield for over 30 years. Sarah's father, Michael Thompson, had built a solid reputation for honest work and fair prices. Since his death from cancer 2 years ago, Sarah had been struggling to keep the business afloat. The garage was deeply in debt, and several larger chain shops had opened nearby, taking away much of their customer base. "Sir," Jennifer added, "I also found out that Sarah Thompson has been working 16-hour days trying to save the business. She's been taking on jobs from neighboring towns, and according to local sources, she's never turned away a customer who couldn't afford to pay." Robert leaned back in his leather chair, processing this information. He thought about Sarah's gentle smile and her father's teachings about treating everyone with respect, regardless of their wealth. An idea began forming in his mind. "Jennifer, I want you to arrange something for me. Contact the mayor of Millfield and tell him that Chen Industries is interested in establishing a service center in their town. Set up a meeting for this weekend." The following Saturday, Robert drove back to Millfield in his Mustang, which was now running perfectly after a proper repair at a high-end classic car shop in the city. The town was smaller than he remembered from his brief stop earlier in the week. Main Street was lined with modest shops, many of which had "for lease" signs in their windows. The economic downturn had clearly hit this community hard. Thompson's garage sat at the end of Main Street, its weathered sign hanging slightly askew. Robert could see Sarah through the open bay door, her head buried under the hood of an old sedan. Even from a distance, he could tell she was completely absorbed in her work. He parked across the street and watched for a moment. A steady stream of customers came and went. Elderly couples with aging vehicles, young families struggling to make ends meet, and local tradespeople whose trucks and vans were essential to their livelihoods. Sarah treated each customer with the same care and attention, regardless of whether they were paying for a simple oil change or a major engine repair. Robert noticed something else, too. Several times he watched Sarah discreetly slip money from her own pocket into the cash register after a customer paid. She was clearly subsidizing repairs for people who couldn't afford the full cost. His meeting with Mayor Patterson was enlightening. The town was desperate for economic development. Many young people were leaving for opportunities in larger cities, and local businesses were struggling to compete with big box stores and chain operations. "Mr. Chen," the mayor said earnestly, "any investment from a company like yours would be a godsend for our community. We have a skilled workforce and competitive real estate prices. What kind of operation were you considering?" Robert had been formulating his plan throughout the week. "I'm thinking about a comprehensive automotive service center that would specialize in both traditional vehicles and the new electric models that are coming to market. We would need experienced management, someone who understands both the technical aspects and the importance of customer service." Well, if you're looking for automotive expertise, you couldn't do better than Sarah Thompson. That girl knows more about cars than mechanics with 20 years more experience. Her father taught her well. That evening, Robert returned to Thompson's garage just as Sarah was locking up for the night. She looked exhausted, her uniform stained with grease and her face showing the strain of another long day. "Mr. Chen," she exclaimed in surprise, "what are you doing back in Millfield? Is everything okay with the Mustang?" "The car is running perfectly thanks to you," Robert replied. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk. Do you have a few minutes?" Sarah glanced at her watch. It was nearly 8 o'clock and she still had paperwork to complete at home. But something in Robert's tone suggested this was important. "Of course. Would you like to come inside? I can make some coffee." The interior of the garage office was cramped but clean, with automotive manuals stacked on every available surface. Photos of classic cars lined the walls, many featuring a man who was clearly Sarah's father working on various restoration projects. "Sarah," Robert began after accepting a cup of coffee, "I want to be completely honest with you. The meeting I was rushing to the other day was successful because of your help. It was worth a significant amount of money to my company." Sarah smiled. "I'm glad things worked out for you. That's wonderful news. I've been thinking a lot about what you said about your father's philosophy, treating everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. It reminded me of something important that I think I've lost sight of over the years." Robert paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been researching opportunities for expansion, and I believe Millfield would be an excellent location for a new type of automotive service center. But I would need someone to manage it, someone who understands both the technical side and the importance of treating customers right." Sarah's eyes widened as she began to understand what he was suggesting. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the thought, but I couldn't possibly leave Thompson's garage. This place is my father's legacy." "I'm not asking you to leave it," Robert said with a smile. "I'm asking you to expand it." Sarah stared at Robert in disbelief, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "Expand it? I don't understand. Mr. Chen, Thompson's garage is barely staying afloat as it is. I'm 3 months behind on the mortgage, and I've been working 7 days a week just to keep the lights on." Robert leaned forward, his expression earnest. "That's exactly why I want to help. Sarah, what you did for me wasn't just fixing a car. It was a reminder of what real service looks like. In my business world, everything is about profit margins and quarterly reports, but you helped a complete stranger expecting nothing in return. That's rare." Sarah set down her cup and ran her hands through her hair. "I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't see how I could possibly expand. I don't have the money, and honestly, I'm not sure this town can support much more than what we already have. What if I told you that Chen Industries is looking to establish a network of service centers that can handle both traditional vehicles and the new generation of electric cars?" Robert pulled out his tablet and showed Sarah some preliminary designs. These wouldn't be typical chain shops. They would be community-focused operations that maintain the personal touch while offering cutting-edge technology. Sarah studied the images on the screen. The proposed facility was impressive. Multiple service bays, modern equipment, and even a customer lounge with comfortable seating and complimentary refreshments. But it was the mission statement that caught her attention, combining advanced automotive technology with old-fashioned customer care. "This looks amazing," Sarah admitted, "but I still don't understand how I fit into this picture. I'm just a small-town mechanic. You're much more than that." Robert said firmly. "You're someone who understands that fixing cars is about more than just making repairs. It's about helping people. I've watched you work, Sarah. I've seen how you treat your customers, how you go out of your way to help people even when it costs you money you don't have." Sarah felt a flush of embarrassment. She hadn't realized Robert had been observing her business so closely. "Those people are my neighbors, my friends. When Mrs. Patterson's pension check is late and her car needs new brakes, what am I supposed to do? Let her drive around unsafe?" "Exactly my point," Robert said with a smile. "That's the kind of thinking that's missing in today's business world. What if I told you that Chen Industries wants to partner with Thompson's Garage? We would provide the funding for expansion, the latest diagnostic equipment, and training on electric vehicle technology. In return, you would manage the operation and maintain the community focus that makes this place special." Sarah's mind was racing. The opportunity sounded incredible, but it also seemed too good to be true. "What's the catch?" "There has to be a catch," Robert chuckled. "The catch is that you would have to work with corporate executives who sometimes forget that customers are people, not just revenue sources. And you'd probably have to attend some meetings where people use a lot of fancy business terms to say simple things." "I think I could handle that," Sarah said with a small smile. "But Robert, can I ask you something? Why me?" "You could probably find experienced managers from big companies who know a lot more about running large operations." Robert was quiet for a moment, looking at the photos of Sarah's father on the wall. "3 years ago, my father passed away. He built Chen Industries from nothing, starting with a small electronics repair shop not much different from this place. Before he died, he told me that success wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference in people's lives." He turned back to Sarah. "I'll be honest with you. I lost sight of that for a while. I got caught up in the corporate game, focused on stock prices and market share. But when you helped me the other day, it reminded me of what my father always said. Character is revealed not in how you treat people who can help you, but in how you treat people who can't." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Your father sounds like he was a lot like mine. Dad always said that if you treat people right, everything else will work itself out." "So what do you say?" Robert asked. "Are you willing to take a chance on this partnership?" Sarah looked around the small office that had been her second home for so many years. The thought of losing it terrified her, but the possibility of expanding it, of being able to help more people while securing her own future, was incredibly appealing. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "This is a huge decision, and I want to make sure I'm making it for the right reasons." "Of course," Robert replied. "Take all the time you need. But Sarah, there's something else I want you to consider. This partnership wouldn't just benefit you, it would benefit the entire community. We're talking about creating jobs, bringing new technology to the area, and establishing Millfield as a model for how automotive service should be done." Over the next week, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Robert's offer. She discussed it with her best friend Lucy, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She talked to Mayor Patterson, who was enthusiastic about the potential economic impact. She even visited her father's grave and had a long, one-sided conversation about what he would want her to do. The turning point came when Mrs. Patterson's ancient station wagon finally gave up completely. Sarah spent 2 days trying to find affordable used parts, but the car was simply too old and too far gone. She watched the elderly woman struggle with the news that she would need to find several $1,000s for a different vehicle. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson," Sarah said gently. "I wish there was something more I could do." "It's not your fault, dear," Mrs. Patterson replied, though Sarah could see the worry in her eyes. "I'll figure something out. Maybe my nephew in the city can help." That evening, Sarah called Robert. "I have some questions about your proposal," she said. "But first, I need to know something. Would this partnership allow me to continue helping people who are struggling financially?" "Sarah," Robert replied, "that's exactly what I was hoping you would ask. Part of our business model includes a community assistance program. We want to establish a fund that helps people who can't afford necessary repairs. It's good business and good for the community." "In that case," Sarah said, taking a deep breath, "I think we should talk seriously about moving forward." The next morning, Robert arrived at Thompson's Garage with a team of architects and engineers. They spent the day measuring, planning, and discussing how to expand the facility while maintaining its character and charm. Sarah was amazed by how thoroughly they had researched not just her business but the entire community. "We want to break ground within 6 weeks. Robert explained as they reviewed the preliminary plans. The construction will take about 4 months, and during that time, we'll arrange for temporary facilities so you don't lose any business. As Sarah looked at the detailed blueprints spread across her father's old desk, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. She was about to embark on the biggest adventure of her life, and she couldn't help but wonder what her father would think of these developments. Little did she know that the biggest surprise was yet to come. Construction on the new Thompson's Automotive Center began exactly 6 weeks later, just as Robert had promised. Sarah watched from the temporary facility across the street as crews worked to transform her father's modest garage into something that looked like it belonged in a major city. Despite Robert's assurances that they would preserve the character of the original building, she couldn't help feeling anxious about all the changes. The temporary facility was actually busier than the old garage had ever been. Word about the partnership with Chen Industries had spread throughout the region, and people were driving from neighboring towns to see what all the excitement was about. Sarah found herself working longer hours than ever, but for the first time in years, she wasn't worried about paying the bills. "I still can't believe this is really happening," Lucy said one evening as she stopped by to bring Sarah dinner. "6 months ago you were about to lose everything, and now you're running the most talked-about automotive business in 3 counties. Sarah looked up from the engine she was working on and smiled. "Some days I can't believe it either. Robert has been incredible to work with. He checks in regularly, but he never tries to micromanage or tell me how to run things. It's like he really trusts me to know what I'm doing." "Speaking of Robert," Lucy said with a mischievous grin, "when was the last time you saw him? You two seem to spend a lot of time talking on the phone." Sarah felt her cheeks redden. "It's business, Lucy. We're partners in a major expansion project. Of course we talk regularly." "Uh-huh," Lucy replied, clearly not convinced. "Business partners who send each other flowers when one of them is having a stressful week." "That was just a nice gesture," Sarah protested, though she couldn't hide her smile. The truth was, she had found herself looking forward to Robert's calls and visits more than she cared to admit. Despite their different backgrounds, they shared similar values and a surprising amount in common. They both had lost parents they were close to, both were trying to honor family legacies, and both believed that business should be about more than just making money. 3 months into construction, Robert arrived for his weekly site inspection with some unexpected news. "Sarah, I have something to tell you. Chen Industries just received approval for a major government contract to develop charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. It's going to require us to accelerate our timeline for opening service centers." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. "What does that mean for us here in Millfield?" "It means we're going to be busier than we originally anticipated," Robert said with a grin. "The government wants to establish rural charging stations, and they want them serviced by certified technicians. You're about to become one of the most important automotive service managers in the state." The news was exciting but also overwhelming. Sarah had been preparing for the expansion, but the thought of being responsible for such a significant operation was intimidating. "Robert, I have to be honest with you. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night wondering if I'm really qualified for all of this." Robert's expression grew serious. "Sarah, can I tell you something? I've been in business for over 20 years, and I've worked with some of the most successful people in the industry. But I've never met anyone who combines technical skill, business sense, and genuine care for people the way you do. You're not just qualified. You're exactly what this project needs." As they walked through the construction site, Sarah marveled at how the new building was taking shape. The main service area was 3 times the size of the original garage, with hydraulic lifts, computerized diagnostic equipment, and a dedicated bay for electric vehicle service. But Robert's team had also preserved elements of the original building, including the office where her father had conducted business for so many years. "There's something else I wanted to show you," Robert said, leading her to a section of the building she hadn't seen yet. "We're installing something special here." He opened a door to reveal a beautifully appointed customer lounge with comfortable seating, a coffee bar, and large windows overlooking the town. But what took Sarah's breath away was the wall display featuring photos and memorabilia from the original Thompson's garage, including several pictures of her father working on classic cars. "Robert," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "This is incredible. How did you get all of these photos?" "I contacted some of your father's old customers," Robert explained. They were more than happy to share their memories. I thought it was important to honor the history of this place while we build its future. Sarah stood in front of a photo of her father teaching her to change a tire when she was 8 years old. She remembered that day clearly. He had been so patient, explaining each step and encouraging her to try it herself. "Dad would have loved this," she said softly. "I think he would have been proud of what you're building here," Robert replied. "You're taking everything he taught you and using it to help even more people." As the grand opening approached, Sarah threw herself into preparation. She studied electric vehicle technology, attended training sessions with Chen Industries engineers, and worked with Robert to develop customer service protocols that would maintain the personal touch of the original garage while meeting the standards of a modern service center. The night before the opening, Sarah was doing a final walkthrough of the facility when Robert arrived with a bottle of champagne and Chinese takeout. "I thought you might be too nervous to eat," he said, "but you need to keep your strength up for tomorrow." They sat in the customer lounge, eating dinner surrounded by the photos and memories of Thompson's garage history. Sarah found herself thinking about how much her life had changed since that day she met Robert on the highway. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they finished eating. "That day when I helped you with your car, were you really just a businessman rushing to a meeting, or was there more to the story?" Robert was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "You want the truth? I was having the worst week of my professional life. The Yamamoto deal was our last chance to save the company from some serious financial problems. I was stressed, exhausted, and honestly, pretty close to giving up on everything. And then you met me," Sarah said with a grin. "And then I met you," Robert confirmed. "A young woman who stopped everything to help a stranger, expecting nothing in return. It reminded me why I got into business in the first place, to solve problems and help people." Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest. "You know, you saved me too. I was about to lose everything Dad worked for. This partnership gave me hope when I didn't think I had any left." As they sat there sharing memories and dreams for the future, Sarah noticed Robert looking at something around her neck. She reached up unconsciously and touched the small pendant she always wore, a simple gold locket that had belonged to her grandmother. "That's a beautiful necklace," Robert said quietly. "It looks like it has sentimental value." "It was my grandmother's," Sarah replied. "She gave it to my mother, and Mom gave it to me before she died. It's not worth much, but it means everything to me." Robert's expression changed suddenly, his face growing pale. "Sarah, may I ask, what's inside the locket?" Puzzled by his reaction, Sarah opened the small pendant to reveal a tiny photograph of a young Asian woman holding a baby. "This is my grandmother, Mei Chen, and my mother as an infant. Grandmother came to America from China in the 1940s. Why do you ask?" Robert stared at the photograph, his hands beginning to tremble. "Sarah, what was your grandmother's full name?" Sarah looked at Robert with growing concern as his face went completely white. His hands were shaking as he stared at the tiny photograph in her locket. "Robert, what's wrong?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Sarah," Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your grandmother's full name. Please, I need to know." "Her name was Mei Chen Thompson," Sarah replied slowly. "She took my grandfather's last name when they married, but her maiden name was Chen." "Robert, you're scaring me." "What's going on?" Robert stood up abruptly and began pacing around the room. He ran his hands through his hair and took several deep breaths before turning back to Sarah. "I need to show you something. Can you come with me to my car?" Confused and worried, Sarah followed Robert outside to his Mustang. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small photo album that looked well-worn from years of handling. His hands were still trembling as he opened it to the first page. "This is my grandmother, Chen Mei Li," he said, pointing to a black-and-white photograph of a young Chinese woman. "And this," he turned the page, "is my grandfather, David Chen, and their children." Sarah gasped as she looked at the second photograph. It showed a young Chinese man with 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. The girl looked remarkably similar to the woman in Sarah's locket. "Robert," Sarah said, her voice catching, "that girl, she looks exactly like my grandmother." "Because she is your grandmother," Robert said quietly. "Sarah, I think Mei Chen Thompson was my great-aunt, my grandfather's sister." Sarah stared at the photographs, trying to process what Robert was telling her. "That's impossible. My grandmother never mentioned having brothers in America. She always said she came here alone. Robert sat down heavily on the hood of his car. There's a lot about that time period that families don't talk about. My grandfather David came to America in 1938, but the rest of his family was supposed to follow later. Then the war started and immigration became much more difficult. He turned to another page in the album. According to family stories, David had a younger sister named May, who was supposed to join him in 1941. But then Pearl Harbor happened and everything changed. She didn't make it to America until after the war ended. By then, David had already established himself as David Chen and they had lost touch. Sarah felt dizzy as the implications began to sink in. Are you saying that we're cousins? Robert finished. If I'm right, we're second cousins. Your grandmother and my grandfather were brother and sister. Sarah looked back at the photographs, comparing them to the image in her locket. The resemblance was undeniable, but it seemed too incredible to be true. How can we be sure? This could just be a coincidence. Robert pulled out his phone. There's a way to find out for certain. My family has kept detailed genealogical records, and I know someone who specializes in Chinese-American family history. With your permission, I'd like to have her research both of our family lines. Sarah nodded, still in shock. Yes, of course. But Robert, if this is true, what does it mean for our business partnership? What does it mean for us? Robert looked at her seriously. It means that what happened that day on the highway wasn't just a coincidence. It means that somehow, after 3 generations, our families found each other again. The next morning, despite the stunning revelation from the night before, Sarah threw herself into preparing for the grand opening of Thompson's Automotive Center. Local news crews had arrived early, and a crowd was already gathering outside the building. Mayor Patterson had declared it Millfield Economic Development Day, and the governor was expected to attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Sarah tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but her mind kept wandering to the conversation with Robert. She had called the genealogist that morning and provided all the information she had about her grandmother's background. The research would take several days, but Sarah already felt certain in her heart that Robert was right. You look nervous, Lucy observed as she helped Sarah set up the customer lounge for the opening ceremony. Is this about the family connection thing you told me about? Partly, Sarah admitted. It's just overwhelming. 6 months ago, I was struggling to keep Dad's garage open, and now I'm about to cut the ribbon on a major automotive center. And finding out that Robert and I might be related, it changes everything. Does it, though? Lucy asked thoughtfully. I mean, you've built a successful business partnership based on shared values and mutual respect. Finding out your family doesn't change that. It just explains why you connected so easily. At 10 o'clock sharp, the ceremony began. Robert gave a speech about Chen Industries' commitment to rural economic development and the importance of combining advanced technology with traditional customer service values. Mayor Patterson talked about what the new facility would mean for the community. Then it was Sarah's turn to speak. Standing at the microphone, looking out at a crowd of neighbors, friends, and business associates, Sarah felt a wave of emotion. 3 years ago, when my father passed away, I thought I might have to close Thompson's garage. Dad always taught me that if you treat people right and work hard, good things will happen. I never imagined just how right he was. She paused, looking at Robert, who was standing nearby with an encouraging smile. This new facility represents more than just business expansion. It represents the power of people coming together to build something meaningful. My father would have been amazed to see what we've accomplished here, and I think he would have been especially pleased to know that it all started with a simple act of kindness. After the ribbon cutting, the crowd toured the new facility. Sarah was amazed by the positive response from the community. Longtime customers marveled at the modern equipment while appreciating the preserved elements from the original garage. Business owners from neighboring towns expressed interest in bringing their fleets to the new service center. The highlight of the day came when Mrs. Patterson, whose old station wagon had finally died months earlier, drove up in a brand new electric vehicle. Sarah, dear, she said with tears in her eyes, I wanted you to be the first person to service my new car. When I heard about your community assistance program, I applied for help, never expecting to qualify for something this nice. Sarah hugged the elderly woman tightly. Mrs. Patterson, you've been supporting local businesses in this town for 40 years. If anyone deserves a reliable car, it's you. As the day wound down and the crowds began to disperse, Robert approached Sarah. I just got a call from the genealogist. She was able to access some immigration records from the 1940s. Sarah, it's confirmed. Your grandmother Mei Chen and my grandfather David Chen were definitely brother and sister. Sarah felt a mixture of joy and amazement wash over her. So we really are family? We really are, Robert confirmed. And Sarah, there's something else. The genealogist found something interesting in the records. When your grandmother first arrived in America, she was looking for her brother David. She even contacted some Chinese-American organizations trying to find him. But David had anglicized his name and moved several times for business reasons. They spent years trying to find each other but never connected. Sarah thought about her grandmother, who had died when Sarah was 15. May had often seemed sad when she talked about the family she had left behind in China, but she never mentioned having a brother in America. They probably both gave up hope of ever finding each other, Sarah said softly, but their grandchildren found each other instead. Robert replied, and in the most unlikely way possible. As they stood together outside the new automotive center, watching the last of the visitors drive away, Sarah realized that her life had become something she never could have imagined. She had not only saved her father's business legacy, but had discovered a family connection that had been lost for over 70 years. Robert, she said, I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our story. 1 year after the grand opening of Thompson's Automotive Center, Sarah stood in her office reviewing the quarterly reports with a sense of pride and amazement. The business had exceeded every projection Robert and his team had made. They were now servicing vehicles from 5 surrounding counties, had trained 12 new technicians, and their electric vehicle charging station was one of the busiest in the region. More importantly, the Community Assistance Program had helped over 200 families get reliable transportation. Sarah had been able to hire 6 full-time employees from the local area, and 3 of them were young women who had never considered automotive careers before seeing Sarah's success. Knock. Knock, Robert said as he appeared in her doorway. Do you have a minute to talk? Always, Sarah replied, gesturing for him to sit down. Over the past year, their business relationship had evolved into something much deeper. They had discovered that being family had made their partnership even stronger, and Sarah had to admit that her feelings for Robert had grown far beyond professional respect. I have some news, Robert said, settling into the chair across from her desk. Chen Industries just received approval for a major expansion of the electric vehicle infrastructure project. We're going to be establishing service centers in 12 more rural communities across 3 states. Sarah's eyes widened. That's incredible, Robert. Congratulations. This must be exactly what you hoped for when you first pitched the program. It is, Robert said, but his expression was more serious than celebratory. Sarah, they want you to oversee the entire program. You would be the regional director for rural automotive services, responsible for training managers and establishing the same community-focused approach we've developed here. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. That sounds like an amazing opportunity, but what would it mean for Thompson's? I can't abandon what we've built here. You wouldn't have to, Robert assured her. This facility would remain your home base and you'd have a team of assistant managers to handle day-to-day operations when you're traveling. But Sarah, I want you to understand what this really means. You'd be responsible for helping thousands of families get access to reliable transportation and good jobs. You'd be building something that could last for generations. Sarah walked to the window that overlooked the service bays. Through the glass, she could see her team working on various vehicles, electric cars, classic restorations, and everyday family vehicles. Each repair represented someone's ability to get to work, take their children to school, or visit aging relatives. It was exactly the kind of meaningful work her father had always talked about. There's something else, Robert said quietly. The program headquarters would be located here in Millfield. We'd be renovating the old textile mill on the edge of town and turning it into a training center and administrative facility. It would bring about 50 new jobs to the community. Sarah turned back to Robert, seeing something in his expression that she hadn't noticed before. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Robert smiled sheepishly. I may have been working on it since about a week after our grand opening. I kept thinking about what your father said about treating people right and what my grandfather believed about business being a way to help communities. This program could be their legacy. And yours, Sarah added softly. Robert, when you first proposed partnering with Thompson's Garage, I thought you were just a successful businessman looking for a good investment. I never imagined you were someone who shared my values so completely. Sarah, Robert said, standing up and moving closer to her. There's something I've been wanting to tell you. This partnership has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done professionally, but working with you has been even more important to me personally. Finding out we're family was amazing, but what I feel for you goes beyond family connection. Sarah felt her heart racing as Robert stepped closer. She had been hoping he would say something like this for months, but had been afraid to acknowledge her own feelings. I feel the same way, she said quietly. But Robert, we're business partners and we're family. Isn't this complicated? Second cousins can legally marry in most states, Robert said with a grin. And some of the best business partnerships in history have been between married couples. Besides, I think our grandparents would have wanted their families to be connected again. Sarah laughed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Did you just propose to me using legal precedent and business logic? Maybe, Robert said, pulling a small jewelry box from his pocket. But I'm hoping this makes it more romantic. Sarah gasped as Robert opened the box to reveal a beautiful diamond ring with a vintage setting. Robert, it's gorgeous. But how did you know? I had it designed based on a ring that belonged to your grandmother, Robert explained. I found a photograph of it in my grandfather's papers. I thought it would be fitting for our families to be connected by something that honored both of them. As Robert slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, she felt tears of joy streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes to the ring, yes to the job, yes to building something amazing together. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the altar of Millfield Community Church wearing her grandmother's wedding dress, which had been carefully preserved and altered to fit her perfectly. The church was packed with friends, family, customers, and employees from Thompson's Automotive Center. Lucy served as maid of honor, and Robert's business partner from Chen Industries was his best man, but the most meaningful moment came when Pastor Williams asked if anyone had anything to say about why Robert and Sarah should be joined in marriage. Mrs. Patterson, now 92 and still driving her electric vehicle, stood up slowly. I've lived in this town for 70 years, she said in her clear, strong voice. I watched Sarah's father build his business on the principle of treating everyone fairly, and I've watched Sarah honor that legacy while building something even greater. Robert could have invested his money anywhere, but he chose to invest in our community and in Sarah's dream. These two young people represent the best of what family and partnership can be. As Sarah and Robert exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other while continuing to serve their community, Sarah thought about the remarkable journey that had brought them together. It had started with a broken-down car on a lonely highway and a simple act of kindness. It had led to the discovery of a family connection that had been lost for generations and the building of a business that was changing lives throughout the region. The reception was held in the customer lounge of Thompson's Automotive Center, surrounded by the photographs and memories that honored the past while celebrating the future. As Sarah and Robert danced to their first song as a married couple, surrounded by the people whose lives they had touched, Sarah realized that her father had been absolutely right. If you treat people well and work hard, good things really do happen. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those good things turn out to be more wonderful than you ever dared to dream. 3 years later, the Thompson Chen Rural Automotive Service Program had grown to include centers in 15 communities across 4 states. Sarah had been featured on the cover of Business Weekly magazine as the entrepreneur who's revolutionizing rural transportation, and Robert had been honored by the Department of Energy for his innovations in electric vehicle infrastructure. But their greatest achievement was measured not in awards or profit margins, but in the thousands of families who now had reliable transportation, the hundreds of young people who had found meaningful careers in automotive technology, and the dozens of small communities that had been revitalized by good jobs and economic opportunity. As Sarah tucked their 6-month-old daughter into her crib one evening, she whispered the same words her father had said to her when she was small. Remember, little one, it doesn't matter where someone comes from or what they drive. Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. And if you do that, the world will surprise you with wonderful things. Outside, Robert was in the garage working on his father's Mustang, keeping the classic car in perfect condition for the day when he could teach his daughter to appreciate the beauty of automotive craftsmanship. The car that had brought them together would always remind them that sometimes the most important journeys begin with a simple willingness to help a stranger in need.